Ladies and gentlemen, the story you are about to see is true.
6 months, they did very careful testing. I think Dr. Schaefer's problems with the paper, as we discussed recently, relate to the fact that there was some critical information missing. For example, the investigators talked about the solution that they used, namely 3 milligrams per milliliter of propofol, but they neglected to mention the infusion rate. They gave a pump for 2 hours. So there was information that's obviously critical that was missing, but my take on the paper was a lot different than Dr. Schaefer's, because I believe that in the review process you can obtain that kind of missing information from the investigators. And I think it was a very interesting study in terms of outcome. They showed that using propofol in this way was safe and effective for normalizing disturbed sleep in patients who had chronic intractable insomnia. And certainly it's not a definitive study, but as a first study, I thought it was quite interesting, and so I would have a different take. And I think it would be unfortunate if that paper was not, if the authors of that paper were not given an opportunity to at least have their paper reviewed by experts in the field.
Now, oftentimes are papers written and then subjected to peer review?
All the time.
I mean, is this before or after publication that the peer review takes place?
Oh, the peer review is before they're considered for publication. And as I said, once they undergo peer review, as an author, we get back critique sheets, very detailed points that the reviewers want us to address. Sometimes they just reject your paper. They think that you cannot respond adequately to the criticisms, but often the paper is just modified and we resubmit it and it's re-reviewed, and if we do an adequate job of addressing the concerns, then it can be considered for publication. Presently, papers typically undergo 2, 3, or 4 reviews before they're accepted, so it's a lengthy process.
So even the papers that you've published on propofol, they've been subjected to peer review before they're published?
Yeah, I mean, the paper that I just discussed, which I consider a very important paper because of max sedation, which is the current practice. I mean, it literally changed the practice in anesthesia, was rejected by both anesthesiology and anesthesia analgesia. And another paper that Dr. Schaefer referred to repeatedly in all his modeling, the paper by my former fellow Da-Woo Kim from South Korea, looking at the level, we send them to other journals. Sometimes what's considered a lesson, the articles that are published in a journal are cited by other authors and in other journals. So it's something that's very important.
This max sedation study that you did, that was rejected by anesthesia and analgesia?
Yes.
Familiar with the, you read the toxicology report?
Yes, I've read the toxicology report, yes.
And you're familiar with the level of propofol, the levels of the razepam?
Specimens I might need to have a refresher if you're asking me to recall them from the top of my head. The other experts is polypharmacy.
Now, polypharmacy, this, the use of that term, is that a bad term?
Well, in anesthesia, it's what we do every day. We're polypharmacists. We combine drugs to achieve better effect with less medication, because drugs, when they're combined, can have additive or even synergistic effects. And in that way, we try to eliminate the side effects from any one drug by giving lower doses of several drugs. And the challenge is to make sure you don't have adverse interactions, to combine and do them in the appropriate doses.
And with respect to propofol itself, is it commonly combined with other drugs in its use?
Well, one of the follow-up studies that we did for max sedation, published a few years later, we actually demonstrated the benefit of giving small doses of midazolam before propofol. I sort of called it for pre-medication or for induction of sedation. And that midazolam propofol technique has become sort of the standard technique for MAC sedation.
Now, in reviewing the facts of this case, you've familiarized yourself with Dr. Schaefer's report, I take it.
Yes, he actually had 2 reports, as I recall.
And with respect to his modeling, as it relates to the statements of Dr. Murray, are you familiar with those?
If you could show me exactly what you're referring to, it was a lengthy letter. He drew a number of graphs, if that's what you're referring to.
In his preparation of graphs, I want to show you.
Could you show me the axis? Oh, thank you. I need to tell Dr. Schaefer he needs to learn how to spell plasma, because I noticed it was also misspelled in the
Objection,
FDA.
this is not Dr. Schaefer's graph, which was made by some other company as illustrated on the bottom of the exhibit.
The objection is saying it's also non-responsive. So the partial answers can disregard. Can we have clarity, because we're showing the graph? Has this been identified before?
Well, you know, I think that exact graph is in evidence.
I think it's in the letter, Schaefer's.
This is a modified graph. An actual graph.
I think that would help if we can. Can the people be of some assistance if it was marked previously, please?
Here's a copy of Dr. Schaefer's report.
Well, I know, but is there an exhibit attached?
We can make this exhibit, would it be ZZ?
Well, Mr. Waldman, unless you want to reference something specifically.
But I'll be happy to help. There's hundreds of exhibits.
Yes, there are. You want to take a moment? If counsel would, please.
Well, idealized blood concentration curves, which might result from 2 milligram doses, with the caveat that that's an average or mean value. In the case of Mr. Jackson, it could have been different.
The midazolam levels.
Yes, I believe so. At least I remember in the letter or the declaration that he submitted.
I need just a minute. I thought I had that one set out.
Yeah, you know, I want to ask for clarification. I show CC as a photo of a plastic bag.
3 Cs.
Is it triple C?
Yes, it's true.
Triple C, please. Thank you.
Take the afternoon break so I don't
And
waste
for the whole evening, too.
Okay.
May I see counsel, please?
Well, obviously, Dr. White here is taking a swipe at Dr. Schaefer, asking him to spell plasma correctly on his paper. And there's obviously a dichotomy here. You've got the old school with Dr. White, who's obviously taking protect the doctors. They're still practicing medicine. You can't hold the doctors responsible for what they do because there's a lot of different ways to look at how propofol can be administered and for what purposes. And he holds the the first and only study done by Mr. Kim
Recess and
in the
adjournment
Orient.
at this time. Dr. White, thank you for your testimony. Rather than keep you up here right now, I'm going to excuse you and thank you and ask you.
So we have that going on, and here's the judge, having talked to both sides, decides he's not going to let them mess this trial up. But it's obvious that Dr. Schaefer is the younger doctor who's got years of experience, and he's trying to hold the medical profession to a little higher standard than what Dr. White does. At least that's my take on this. And still, we have not heard anything, to my ears, about core body temperature of Michael that would determine within a few minutes when he actually died. So we're just going on Conrad Murray's statement of when he found him just before noon or at noon on the 25th, as he termed it, having a bad reaction. I would call that dead. But whoever's terminology you want to use, it's obvious there's a battle here for the minds of the jurors to convince them that propofol can be used with these other drugs and it's kind of safe. I think this is very risky for the defense. This is very risky. This could backfire. William Wagner on the Conrad Murray trial in Los Angeles.
Understand and assure and promise us you will follow the written admonitions which I provided to you at the beginning of the case, as well as these continuing verbal admonitions. All indicating the affirmative. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to ask you to join us at 8:45 tomorrow morning. And again, with my continued thanks, have a good evening. We'll see you tomorrow morning at 8:45. Good night.
That's a very happy judge. He must be on happy pills because he's always in a very happy disposition, except for this morning when attorneys were interrupting each other and the witness was interrupting the attorneys and things got a little testy. And that's my report in the Conrad Murray trial for the killing of Michael Jackson.